The United States makes the UN work when it wants it to work. And that is exactly the way it should be, because the only question for the United States is what's in our national interest.
My name is John, and the International Criminal Court is back in session after a week of hiatus. It is October 13, 2024, and before I start today's video, I want to express my apologies to every single one of you, because, as I said, I've been on a hiatus, and the reason why that is because, for those of you who don't, follow me on, Discord or something like that, I've been out with a very nasty cold that essentially knocked out my voice, and in turn, I couldn't really do the videos. And I didn't want to do the videos at least 75% strength. And right now, I would say I am more than 75% strength. I still got a bit of a rough throat, along with maybe sniffling a bit. But otherwise, I feel fine. More than good enough to do videos again. And yeah, I'm glad to be back. Now, with that being said, folks, let's get started on today's circus. That is the Russo-Ukrainian War. First off, we're going to talk about the southern central Donetsk direction, UGLEDAR. So, in the last video I made, UGLEDAR was still very much contested and pretty much encircled, but now the Russians had taken full control over the town of UGLEDAR, and as of right now, they are steamrolling some empty fields that are probably no longer habited by the armed forces of Ukraine. And as far as I'm concerned, the Russians have not only secured UGLEDAR, but they are now focusing pretty much on Kharkov and Velika Novosilka. In Zaporozhye, the Russians have taken Livodine, which I think was under Russian control at some point, before the 2023 counteroffensive. But the Ukrainians took it back, and now the Russians have it under their control again. So this advance here in this direction means that Russians are either going to make life even more difficult for the Ukrainians that are in Galeopol, or they're going to do an offensive to take the town of Velika Novosilka, like right here. There was even reports that the Russians had taken control over more parts of Kamyansky, which would be like this part right here. Like, they were able to cross the river and take these parts. But as far as I know, it appears the Ukrainians were able to push them back to their side of the river. And so far, the Russians have not been able to try again. Or there's a possibility, because some mappers are saying so, that the Russians are still there, and that the Ukrainians are lying about the situation, and that it is a lot worse than Ukraine wants people to know about. So yeah. But yeah, not much going on the Zaporozhye front, other than maybe rumors and speculation of a big offensive this late fall or winter. But yeah, keep an eye out on that front. In the Kharkov direction, the Russians have established complete control over the village of Ostrivske, which is one of the last settlements before entering Kharkov itself. And there have even been some rumors that the Russians have taken the first neighborhoods of Kharkov, like this part right here. The Russians have also taken around 40 to 50% control over the village of Maximilianivka. And also the Russians have reportedly taken full control over the village of Sukirne. And with the taking of this village here, the Russians have now besieged the town of Selidova on 3 sides, from the east, north, and south. Well, mostly, because there's one road out of here. But the only direction where Ukrainians can still supply Selidova is in the western direction from the city of Pokrovsk, which is now pretty much a frontline city, because I'll get to that in a moment. But yeah, Selidova is pretty much now partially encircled on 3 sides, and yeah, it's a cauldron. Ukrainians got to get out of there before it becomes completely encircled. And it wouldn't surprise me if the Ukrainians don't fight for Selidova because of the deteriorating situation there. But then again, knowing Zelensky and Siersky, I think they're going to be reckless and try to keep those guys in there for as long as they can until it becomes clear that they won't be able to hold on to the town. Now, moving a little further north towards the actual Pokrovsk direction, the villages of Lisovka and Suky Yar are now being contested by the Russians, and if the Russians are able to take these two, they will be within basically a doorstep away from both Mayanograd and Pokrovsk. And speaking of Mayanograd, the Russians have secured control over the towns of Gradivka and the villages of Mykolaiivka and Krasny Yar. So, once again, this puts them at the doorstep of Mayanograd. Even though not Pokrovsk. Sorry about that. Now, in the New York direction, the Russians have not only cleared the town of Ukrainian resistance, but they have also taken some fields, fortifications, and also some outskirts of New York as well. With the taking of New York and its towns here, like its outskirt towns like Leonivka and Nilipivka, the Russians will be able to not only enter Toretsk quite easily, but to also force the Ukrainians potentially to leave the city. In fact, since the last video, the Russians have now taken pretty much control over half of Toretsk city from the Ukrainians. Most of the important parts of Toretsk are now under Russian control, including the commie blocks here and most of these terracons/landfills or trash heap hills or something like that. But yeah, you get what I'm saying. Most of the important parts of Toretsk are now under Russian control, and it shouldn't surprise any of you in the coming weeks or so, before Halloween maybe, that Russia could seize the entirety of Toretsk by then, and in turn, this will speed up the offensive or the battle for Chasiv Yar. And speaking of which, Russians have advanced a little bit within Chasiv Yar, like in the western part of it, but not much. But they have secured a bridgehead in Chasiv Yar, so they are advancing there, but very slowly and with caution. There have been some rumors, by the way, about some advances in Siversk while I was gone, but it appears to have all been fake news or over-exaggerated. And, yeah, so, I mean, I wouldn't be shocked if we saw any major advances, like, later this year in the Siversk direction, but for now, I'm not really counting on it. Siversk is not that important when compared to the next front that I'm going to talk about, and that is the Osko River front. The Russians are reportedly advancing towards Tierney again from the eastern direction, and especially from the north of the town of Nivsky. Russians have also reportedly are contesting for the village of Vishivy in Kharkiv or Kharkov Oblast, after they entered it from Lugansk Oblast in the village of Andriivka. And the Russians are also now contesting for more villages in the Kupiansk front. Hlushkivka, Kalisnivka, or Kalisnikivka, sorry about that, Kulekivka. And there's even reports that the Russians have also taken control over more areas outside of the village of Tabaivka, which in turn will put them in range of taking Stepova Novoselivka and Pishine, the other one. There's also now reports, and I think even geolocations have backed this up, Petropavlivka is now considered contested, so the battle for Petropavlivka is on, which puts us within basically arm's length of a third battle of Kupiansk. Now, personally, I think by the end of November or maybe December or so, the Russians are going to basically collapse most of this front, and it will force the Ukrainians to basically start duking it out with the Russians for the town of Kupiansk, which is one of the largest settlements that the Russians had under control in Kharkov Oblast during 2022, before they lost it, of course, the Ukrainians that same year in September. Also, since the last video, the Ukrainians took the aggregate plant, but now after getting FAB'd like 1 million or so times, and of course getting slaughtered, the Russians have retaken control of the aggregate plant and are reportedly advancing again in both the downtown Citadel area and also going further south to complete the takeover of this part of northern Volchansk. But otherwise, the front is stale, and yeah, that's pretty much it. Kharkov Oblast is not really going to be a focus, in my opinion, for the most part in 2024 for like the remainder of it. If anything, it's going to be Sumy because of this. Now, as all of you know by now, Kursk is not looking good for the Ukrainians. In fact, the Ukrainians are pretty much on their last leg there. They've lost now pretty much half of what they have taken control in Kursk. And strategically wise, they are now down to basically just Suja. Everything else is on flat, like, land. And it's only, like, made up of, like, a few shacks or so. There's just no way for the Ukrainians to hold on to Kursk, at least their parts of Kursk, long term. And in recent news, by the way, the Russians have pushed the Ukrainians out of this area after they tried to counterattack and tried to, like, re-divert their resources from, like, the Suja front to the Glushkovo front, but it appears to have failed. So now the Ukrainians were pushed out of Visiloy, I don't know how to pronounce it, sorry about that, Abukhovka, I think. Abukhovka. And also, I just heard in recent news that the Russians have also kicked the Ukrainians out of Novi Put, but this has yet to be confirmed by Suryak himself and other mappers. Divjin, though, reported on it first, so it may be true. So yeah, it's not looking good for the Ukrainians, and there's even reports that Plikovo is about to be encircled, so expect the Ukrainians to evacuate this area. I even heard reports that Ukrainians are basically leaving Kursk entirely, but I don't think that's true. I think Zelensky and Syrskyi are both egotistical enough to keep this fight going because they're that desperate for Western support. And before I get going, I want to call out a pro-Ukrainian influencer, and you all know where this is going. Denis Davidov. The man, the myth, the legend, the liar, the grifter. Denis is lying about the Kursk situation because, well, he kind of gets paid to do this, if you ask me. Anyway, let's sort of like watch parts of the video and see what he has to say for himself.
Hello my friends and welcome, my name is Denis and this is the latest update from Ukraine. Let's start from the Kursk Oblast because the situation there is not that bad for Ukrainian army after all. You probably know that Russians broke through the Ukrainian defense lines and they entered deep into the Ukrainian controlled territories. Obviously this situation isn't that good for Ukrainian army, but Ukraine started to use this situation in its favor. Now I know that the reinforcements are being sent to the Kursk Oblast and probably Ukraine will conduct this operation trying to encircle the Russian army.
Denis, this is absolutely not true at all. Have you not seen, like, the other maps and also the geolocations? What Deep State is showing you is very far from the truth. And look at this. It shows literally the Ukrainians on the outskirts of Kornivo, which is absolutely not true at all. I mean, this is the actual map right here, or at least closer to the truth. The Ukrainians are cooked in this part of the Kursk front. Absolutely cooked here, and Deep State is way behind. But I almost believe that they're holding back the Russian gains on purpose because for OPSEC reasons, but also they don't want to make the Ukrainian army look weak. I mean, I'm sure there are a lot of reasons why they do this.
Yeah, I may say, Denis, you are too much positive about the situation in Kursk. You need
Yeah, you definitely are way too positive.
To be realistic. Well guys, there are several of the sources which state that definitely Ukraine sent the reinforcements and
Reinforcements from where?
definitely there's a heavy fight ongoing with the possible encirclement of the Russian army. For now we know that their offensive yesterday was repelled with heavy...
Repelled? Denis, you're... My god, look at this map. You called this a repulse? Really?
losses from the Russian side. I have this data which was shared by some of the Ukrainian commanders of the separate battalions and brigades. They stated that yesterday they repelled this Russian attack and now they're trying to counterattack. One of the Ukrainian officers even stated that the dragon should close its mouth. And definitely this military map looks like a dragon. This is the mouth of the dragon, this is the eye. Russians went inside the mouth, so there is the high possibility of this mouth to close with the Russians trapped inside.
There's only one problem. There is no dragon, and the dragon was slayed, Denny's. You literally are lying or you're coping through your teeth right now.
Reportedly, Ukraine deployed the 47th Mechanized Brigade to the Kursk Oblast. Those guys are really capable. I saw many of their videos.
The 47 Mechanized Brigade. We're at the 70 Cooked Brigade. This brigade, by the way, the 47 Mechanized Brigade, is one of the biggest failures of the whole Russo-Ukrainian war. They were literally given a crap ton of NATO training and NATO equipment, and they got completely wasted on all parts of the front. The Zaporozhye front, in the Donetsk and Lugansk fronts, and they also got completely clapped in Kursk too. So what makes you think that they're going to do any better now, Denny's?
Published on YouTube of how they operate with the drones, with artillery, tanks, infantry, so the guys are absolutely great. My friends, if you like the job that I do on YouTube, you might also consider supporting me on Patreon, obviously if you want, and if...
Of course he's going to grift his way, because that's what these grifters do. And also look at the map that the ISW is sharing here. This is something that some cope artist named Scruffy is also sharing here. Look at this. This is absolutely inaccurate at all. None of this is true whatsoever. This is just a bunch of copium by the Ukraine fanboys, and oh my god, this is going to give them so much false hope, despite the fact that it has been proven, especially through the pro-Ukrainian Telegram channels, that this is not only false, but the Russians are also advancing very fast in Kursk. Like, they're retaking everything, like, day by day.
Hard to build a defense line somewhere here. You may build those maybe over here around Sucha to...
Okay, now to be fair, I do think there is going to maybe be a battle for Sucha, but I don't know. I think there's a big likelihood the Ukrainians might just leave Sucha. They might just abandon everything, sort of like how the Russians abandoned Chernigov, Sumy, and Kiev during spring 2022, when they thought they had that agreement done before the Brits ruined it.
Protected settlement, the biggest one Ukraine was able to take in this region. And also you can see this is the Russian defense line. It will be used by Ukrainian army. Every military map source shares its own data about the situation on the ground. I would trust the deep state military map at first. And
that is absolute copium on your part, Denny's. You are lying. You do not want to tell your audience the truth, because it would ruin your grift. It would destroy the illusion that Ukraine is winning the war. And yeah, I can't listen to this guy anymore. He's absolutely lying through his teeth. It's just absolute cringe. So yeah, folks, I'm gonna basically stop here today, but I hoped all of you enjoyed today's video. Hit the like if you can. Subscribe to The Hague if you haven't already. And yeah, I'll see you all next time, everybody, and have a great day. Next week, I should be 100% healthy once more. So take care, and peace out.